Hey, welcome to Road Testament. This week I spoke with Anthony Sheriff, Managing Director of McLaren Automotive, about the 12C Spider, and I tried to get some info out of him about the P1 concept. Are we going to see it in Geneva? And also, I think I have a new thing. It's finger steepling. Yeah, get ready to see some serious, awesome finger steepling. Anthony, great to see you again.
Good to see you, Mike.
So we've seen this car before, but this is the first time you're going to be able to give us a walk around of all the things that are different. And obviously there's things you can see that are different than the coupe, but also a bunch of things that you can't see have already carried over to the next coupe.
That's right.
So this is obviously the 12C Spider, and that you could tell by the fact there's no roof.
It's very observant of you, Mike.
The interesting thing about this is that you developed them both at the same time, this and the coupe, to be equal cars.
That's right. And what we like to say is that the biggest difference between the coupe and Spider is that there's really no difference other than your perceptive noting that there's no roof on the Spider.
It's the first giveaway.
Exactly. We developed a very innovative carbon fiber chassis which has all the structural rigidity in it. So actually there's almost an imperceptible difference there's no perceptible difference in the torsional rigidity and strength of the Spider versus the coupe. So for really the first time, you can drive a Spider that has absolutely the performance and the rigidity and the handling of its coupe sister. And that's what we think makes the 12C Spider pretty unique.
We've talked quickly about rigidity being on par with the coupe. What about Aero? I mean, what are the liabilities that are there Aero liabilities? I mean, top speed?
Top speed is just 2 or 3 miles an hour slower.
Okay.
Obviously with without the smooth rear glass coming down, the air is going to separate a little bit earlier and become more turbulent. And so the drag is, I think, just a few % higher than it is on the coupe, but much less than you would typically expect from a Spider. I think one other thing that's important about the rigidity of the structure is what the roof is actually mounted onto. And so if you have a rigid structure, it means that all of the attachment points of the roof to the A-pillar, all the glass ceiling, it stays fairly stationary even as you go over rough roads. Whereas a more traditional Spider, which will have lots of what we call scuttle shake, where the body twists and shakes, you get glass moving, you get wind noise, whereas this car stays remarkably integral and it has fantastic wind noise and water insulation as well.
Cool. So the buyer of a Spider over a buyer of a coupe, what's the split, do you think, among buyers?
I think what we're seeing now is initially about 70 or 80% of the orders that are coming in over the next several months are coming in as Spider orders, and that's largely because the Spider is the new thing. But we think it's going to stay the majority of the orders because, as I said, really, there's no reason not to buy a Spider. The only reason you'd buy a coupe is if you just didn't want an open car.
Yeah.
There's no disadvantage.
And I just think it looks amazing. I think that the flying buttresses here, is that how you call them? I know that's what they called them
buttresses, yeah.
in France in the old days. It really, I think that the design looks fantastic, and I think it really pulls together the rest of the car, not having the roof. And tell me about these.
Well, they actually have a function as well. They're not just buttresses, but we actually have the air intake for the engine that comes in through the buttresses. And because the buttresses are quite a bit shorter than the roofline on the coupe, the Spider has in many ways almost a more aggressive look. The visual weight of the greenhouse is farther forward. It's leaping forward and has a different character to the coupe. It looks like a coupe type of body style when the roof is closed, but it also has a very aggressive look when the roof is down, and you just see the buttresses, which have the graphic of a Formula One air intake.
Yeah, actually, it looks like two Formula One cars parked next to each other.
There you go.
Great, so let's talk about some of those under the skin bits, because there are a lot of things that you can't see, a lot of upgrades that you guys have done, that buyers of the previous version of the coupe, many of them can be just upgraded in their cars, so they don't have to buy a new car.
Yeah, we did the revisions for the Spider. Obviously, the big news is the Spider, but we had taken on board a lot of the comments that our customers had made, and indeed a lot of the comments that we ourselves made in having driven and lived with the 12C. And there were some improvements that we wanted to make. Some of them were around engine calibration, and so we redid the engine calibration from top to bottom, and in the process found another 25 horsepower and a little bit of performance. We have other things that customers have asked for. We've upgraded the audio system, we've upgraded nav and Bluetooth. We have vehicle lift as an option as well. We've got, as you know, we have an adjustable intake sound on the cars, so depending on which position you put the powertrain button on, you get a car with a more evocative sound or a quieter sound, up to the customer to choose. So we have, there's changes to the ventilation system, to have possibility to have quieter fan settings on automatic. Lots of detail changes, as well as the big substantive ones of 625 horsepower and the new calibration. But as you mentioned, what's unique is we haven't forgotten about our existing customers. We have about 1,500 of who, for us, are very valuable customers who've been the first people to adopt a McLaren. And so what we've decided to do is just what we do with Lewis and Jensen, is if we have an upgrade for one car, we put it on the other car too, because it'll make the car faster. So every one of those customers is going to be receiving almost all of these upgrades on their existing cars free of charge.
The logo on the front, it looks a little bit different. What happened there?
So we've have the option now for what we call stealth badging. Some of the people with orange cars thought that the orange of the logo against the orange of their car was not the best color combination, so we've allowed customers to choose a carbon fiber finish badge set as a zero cost option.
Cool. What are some of the improvements to the nav system and the audio system? Is that?
Well, we have now, the car now has a fully operational sat-nav system, Bluetooth. It really does everything you'd expect. It syncs all of your contacts, pretty much no matter how big your contact list is. The three-way calling, conference calls, call waiting, call holds, all that stuff. Yeah. But we've also added different equalizations with Meridian on the audio system. So some of our customers who have lower quality source material have complained that the precision of the Meridian system sort of brings out into light some of the defects in the source material. They may have an old recording of something that they're fond of. And so what we've done is done different equalizations to allow them to have equalizations that are more punchy or less punchy. Again, to give the customer more choice so that they're happy with what they get.
Right.
Well, this particular car has a semi-aniline interior, which is the highest quality leather we could find. As one of your colleagues says, it feels like the cow's still mooing. And this comes with this perforated leather inserts, which can either be taken in red or in silver or in orange, depending on what exterior color you have. And the whole interior gets covered with a semi-aniline leather. We have a vehicle lift system, which is operated with just a quick flick of the trip computer lever to bring the car up, or to push it down to bring the car down. And unlike some systems which lift the nose and can be ungainly to drive around at anything more than maneuvering speeds, this actually lifts the whole car up. So when the car is lifted up, it looks a bit like an old Group B rally car, right, in terms of its...
And that's kind of cool, because you can hear, with the top down, now you can hear the wastegate noises, and there's like a whole spectrum of noise that, it's not just the engine, that you can now hear with the roof down. And part of that is some changes that you made to the exhaust and to what are the letters again? So now
ISG.
Right, the intake sound generator.
Yeah. So when we drove the first prototypes of the first largely finished prototypes of the Spider, what we did notice is that being more exposed to the elements, you hear things that you might not hear in a closed coupe. And there were some resonances we weren't happy with, so we actually redesigned both the Sport and the normal exhaust system to tune out those resonances, so you have a much higher quality sound. But I think one of the things that makes driving the Spider pretty evocative is you do get, with the roof down, you do get a lot of this emotion in the sounds, and you hear the mechanical sounds of the car working. And one thing you haven't mentioned, which is kind of cool about this car, you've noticed that the rear glass is actually electric. You can move it up and down to act as a wind stop when the roof is down. But when the roof is closed, you can actually lower the rear window, and you get all of that same emotion and noise, but with the roof closed if it's raining or if it's cold outside. So you can get an open driving experience even when the environment is not necessarily the best for putting the top down.
Right. And there's just a lot of crackling and popping and cool stuff that you hear now back there.
Hey, so 625 horsepower. There's things going on in there.
Exactly right. A little bit about the car that you showed in Paris, the P1. So this is a car that we've talked about as having been designed by the wind. What level of designer input was there for that car compared to just straight data from the wind tunnel?
Yeah, so we have to come up with a proportions concept that works. And you say designed by the wind, and people immediately think of a solid shape with wind flowing smoothly over it and separating from the rear in a laminar way without turbulence. But actually, for a super sports car, you're more worried about the air coming in and how that air gets back out again, because you have many, 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 many hundreds, I won't be specific, of horsepower to feed and then to cool off.
Right.
And so the vast majority of the Aero research went into the best places to get air into and air out of the car. At the same time, we tried to achieve a shape which delivers 600 kilos of downforce, which are GT race car levels of performance. And we didn't want it to be something that relied to be stable on having a huge rear wing all the time. So the fundamental shape of the car, I think, probably if you look at it, it resembles more an LMP car than a normal road-going car. The rear bump, the top edge of the rear spoiler actually is at knee height, whereas most cars are about this high.
Yeah.
And that fundamental shape and the fundamental proportion was defined before Frank and his team even took out their magic markers and started sketching.
Right.
And that's what gives the car a very unusual shape. Then all the holes in the intakes and the exhausts were pretty much defined in their position as to where they had to be by the same guy who was head of aerodynamics for the Formula One team and started work on this project. Right. So we have the greatest brains in aerodynamics in the world that told Frank sort of, arrows, this is where the air goes in, this is where the air goes out, this is the fundamental shape of the car, now design around it. And I think part of the purity of this approach has given us a shape that, while it's very complicated, it really holds together. Complicated in its detail, but it's quite pure and simple in its overall shape.
Right. So aerodynamics for, being able to do remarkable things on a racetrack, is that how you see, what you see the buyers of that car wanting to do? Do you see them tracking it?
Absolutely. I mean, we have designed, every McLaren is fundamentally a road car. And you will see when you get a chance that the P1 is an unbelievable road car. It's a car that you do want to get out and drive over mountain passes. It's not a noisy, rigid, difficult to control, I'll only have it on a racetrack type of car. Mm-hmm. It is a proper road car. But at the same time, with the amount of power it has, with the things we've done to the suspension, which again, I can't tell you about yet, and with 600 kilos of downforce, which is game-changing for a road legal car, the level of track performance is like a GT race car.
Right.
And the amount of grip that you generate, especially as you go faster and faster and the downforce increases, is just unbelievable.
And obviously, it's an engine with enormous capability, judging from all the intake. So it obviously needs a lot of cooling. So and when might we know, do you think, about, do you guys have plans to show it in Geneva, maybe show the engine, or you're not talking about that yet? Because I know that everybody wants to see it.
Sometime around then.
Okay.
Sometime around then.
Cool. Anthony, thanks for the rundown on this. And of course, we're looking forward to the P1, learning more about that. So, whenever you get a chance, maybe you want to fill us in.
No problem. You'll be the first to know, Mike.
Fantastic.